Hi everyone. Happy April 1st. It is April Fool's Day. Did anyone play any pranks or do you plan on playing any pranks on anyone today? No? No one? Not anyone? I don't see any hands out there. I'm just kidding. I miss you guys. I wish we could have this discussion. And Mrs. Philpott and I had planned having a fantastic April Fool's Day with you guys, but sadly, we are not together, and that is devastating. So, looks like a beautiful day. I hope you are enjoying your day and doing some fun things. And I am ready to continue with our Fablehaven book. Are you ready to continue? So, we're still at Lost Mesa with Kendra, Gavin, Warren, Dugan. They are inside. They got past all of these traps and tricks and things like that. So they got past the chasm where they had to jump the little stone pillars. They got past the choke pods, barely, but do you remember they lost Neil? It was very sad. And then they got past the dragon. Remember, that's Gavin's talent. He's a dragon tamer. He even speaks the language of dragons. And then now they are at the part past the dragon and getting further towards the vault. Are you ready? Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. As they proceeded down the corridor, Warren led the way, probing the ground with his broken spear. He warned them not to touch the walls and to keep an eye out for tripwires. Now that they had passed beyond the limits of where Tammy had scouted, any danger was possible. The hall ended at a bronze door. Behind it, they found a spiral staircase leading downward. Testing every step before trusting their weight to it, they wound ever deeper into the earth. After hundreds of uninterrupted steps, the stairs ended at a bronze door. "This could be the abode of the Guardian," Warren whispered. "Kendra, hang back." Warren led the way through the unlocked door, followed by Dugan and Gavin. Kendra peered in after them. The lofty room made Kendra think of the inside of a cathedral without pews or windows. Statues stood in elevated niches. Small rooms housing various ornaments branched out from the main chamber. Fading murals decorated the walls and ceiling, and a tremendous ornate altar dominated the far end of the room. Warren, Dugan, and Gavin crossed the room cautiously, all facing in different directions, as Kendra watched from the door. They reached the altar and looked around, gradually relaxing. They started searching all of the side rooms, handling various treasures, but found no guardian to oppose them. Weary of waiting and doubting the presence of danger, Kendra entered the room. Warren was giving the altar a closer examination, hesitantly touching jewels. "Nothing?" Kendra asked. Warren looked up. "Possibly we have not yet awakened or activated the guardian, but if you ask me, I think somebody made off with the artifact a long time ago. I see nothing suspicious. This room should have held our most fearsome challenge, unless the Guardian has already fallen." "It might explain why Tammy and Javier were able to exit the caves without finding the artifact," Kendra observed. "Right, and why a new dragon was placed here a century ago," Warren agreed. Kendra came around to the far side of the altar and froze, reading what had been inscribed there in silver letters. "Did you read this?" Kendra asked softly. "It isn't a language I'm familiar with," Warren said. "It must be a fairy language," Kendra whispered. "It looks like English to me." "What does it say?" he asked. Peering around to make sure Dugan and Gavin were out of earshot, she quietly read the words aloud. Oh my gosh, are you ready for this? "Courtesy of the world's greatest adventurer, this artifact has a new home at Fablehaven." Do you remember who considers themselves the world's greatest adventurer? Do you remember? And who took it and hid it at Fablehaven? Fablehaven had 2 artifacts, guys. Pat and Burgess got the artifact from Lost Mesa and went to Fablehaven. Oh my gosh! Okay, chapter 13, Secret Admirer. We're back at Fablehaven, by the way. Seth lay under the covers in his bed, fully dressed except for his shoes, fingers laced behind his head, staring up at the slanted ceiling of the dark attic room. He was contemplating the difference between courage and stupidity. a distinction Grandpa Sorensen had repeatedly tried to emphasize. He considered himself armed with useful definitions. Stupidity was when you took risks for no good reason. Courage was when you took a calculated risk in order to accomplish something important. Had he been stupid in the past? Sure. Peeking out the window on Midsummer Eve when he had been warned not to had been stupid. The only benefit had been to satisfy his curiosity, and he had nearly gotten his family killed. This summer, he had taken some risks for flimsy reasons as well. Of course, when the risk seemed small, sometimes he didn't mind acting a little stupid. But he had also acted courageously. He had overdosed on courage potion to confront the Revenant in hopes of saving his family. That risk had paid off. Was sneaking out of the house to follow the shadowy manifestation of Coulter and Tanu into the woods going to be dangerous? Absolutely. The question was whether the risk was justified. So if you don't remember what's going on at this point in time, there is a mysterious plague that's turning some of the creatures evil. So then they're attacking everything else, so they're calling it a plague. Okay, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. So in doing some reconnaissance, Tanu and Coulter were both attacked by these dark creatures, and they turned into shadow people that only Seth can see. And we're not sure why Seth is the only one that can see them. But the shadow people, in, communicating the way that they do, have said that they need Seth to come with them because they know more information about what's causing the plague on Fablehaven. Okay? So that's where we are. Earlier that afternoon, Tanu had completed his transformation into a shadow man just outside the window. He had waited in the shade on the deck until sundown when he had ventured off into the woods. A few hours later, with evening deepening, the silent shadows of Tanu and Coulter had returned. Visible only to Seth, they had stood halfway across the yard from the house, allowing Grandpa to address them from the deck. Tanu had indicated that all was well with 2 thumbs up, and they had gestured for Seth to follow them, inviting Grandpa to come along as well. Through pantomime, Coulter had expressed that he would scout ahead as they traveled in order to prevent encounters with dangerous creatures. But Grandpa had declined the invitation. He had stated that if Tanu and Coulter could devise a way for him to follow them without Seth, he would consent to accompany them. As he told them this, Seth stood behind Grandpa, making subtle gestures, stealthily pointing at Grandpa and shaking his head, then pointing to himself, then pointing at them, then winking. None but Seth could see Tanu salute that he had received the message. The house had been still for some time. If he was going to follow through on the message he had mimed to Tanu and Coulter, the moment had arrived. But he hesitated. Was he actually going to disregard a direct order from Grandpa and entrust his life to the shadowy versions of Tanu and Coulter? If Tanu and Coulter had his best interests in mind, would they be willing to let him sneak away with them against Grandpa's wishes? Hopefully they were certain he would be safe and confident that Grandpa would thank them all later. What were the possibilities? They might lead him into a trap, he might die, or be transformed into a shadow himself. Then again, he might solve the mystery of the plague, restore Tanu and Coulter, and save Fablehaven. Seth scooted out from under his covers, pulled on his shoes, and started tying the laces. The bottom line was that Grandpa would have been willing to risk his life on the gamble that the shadows of Tanu and Coulter meant to offer meaningful assistance. He would have followed them if he could have done so alone. He simply was not willing to risk Seth's life. To Seth, this proved that the risk was worth taking. If Grandpa loved him too much to let him take a worthwhile risk, then he would bypass Grandpa. Scooter, you stay. Lay down. Shoes secure, Seth slid his emergency kit out from under the bed. Then he tiptoed down the attic stairs, flinching at every creak. Scooter, lay down. That silly Scoot. Hang on. Give me a second. I'm sorry. I don't want him jumping off of the chair. Come on, baby. All right. Here we go. He doesn't like that I'm in a different spot today and not in my chair where he can snuggle me. So here he is. Do you see him? Say hi, Scoot. Say hi. Is that a Scooter? Is that a Scooter? Could you guys see him? There he is. Yeah, that little bean. All right. Enough distractions, you guys. Why do you always distract me? Okay, let's continue. Shoes secure, Seth slid his emergency kit out from under the bed. Then he tiptoed down the attic stairs, flinching at every creak. At the bottom of the steps, the house remained dark and quiet. Seth hurried along the hall and down the stairs to the entry hall. He stole into Grandpa's study, tugged a chain to turn on a desk lamp, and rummaged through Tanu's bag of potions. After examining several bottles, Seth found the one he wanted, grabbed it, and closed the bag. He switched off the light and crept to the back door. Unlocking it, he slipped outside, where moonlight bathed the yard in silver highlights. "Tanu," Seth hissed in a forced whisper. "Coulter!" A pair of humanoid shadows emerged from behind a hedge, one taller and bulkier than the other. Seth climbed over the deck railing and dropped to the lawn. Immediately, two additional figures streaked toward him, one much bigger than Tanu, the other a little taller than Coulter. Seth uncapped the potion he had swiped and guzzled the contents. By the time Mendigo and Hugo reached him, an effervescent tingling raced through his limbs, and he hovered in the air, a vaporous rendition of himself. Mendigo and Hugo tried in vain to lay hands on him. Of course Grandpa hadn't trusted him. Of course Mendigo and Hugo had been stationed with orders to prevent him from leaving the yard. Was it Seth's fault that Grandpa had neglected to hide Tanu's potions? Coulter and Tanu motioned for Seth to follow. Willing himself forward, Seth drifted behind them as quickly as he could. Mendigo stayed with him, ceaselessly trying to seize him, causing bubbly tingles wherever his wooden hands grabbed. His progress was frustratingly slow. Hugo went to the house and started thumping on the wall. Seth tried to ignore the lights turning on inside. He was most of the way to the woods when Dale called out after him. "Seth, you mind your grandfather and come back right away." Refusing to even look back, Seth shook his head. When Seth reached the edge of the woods, Grandpa spoke from the deck. "Wait, Seth, come back. Tanu, Coulter, hold on, listen. If you're going to do this, at least let me join you." The shadowy figure stopped. Shaking his head emphatically, Seth crossed and uncrossed his arms. This was a trick. As soon as he became solid, Grandpa would drag him home. He waved a hand, goading them to continue. "Seth," Grandpa demanded, "don't wave them onward. Tanu, Coulter, if you really are in possession of yourselves, wait for me." The shadowy figures shrugged at Seth and stood their ground. He waved more frantically for them to proceed. Did they know his grandfather at all? "Mendigo," Grandpa called, "stand down. You will accompany Seth and me. Hugo, fetch the cart. I take it the cart would be the quickest means to reach our destination?" Tanu nodded. Seth turned and nodded at Grandpa. "We'll have to wait for you to solidify," Grandpa said. "Let me grab a flashlight and put on more appropriate clothing." He went back inside. Seth waved for Tanu and Coulter to lead on, but they shook their heads. "I saw that," Dale called from the deck. "Don't keep egging them on. Your grandpa is as good as his word. He means to come with you, and if you ask me, you'll fare better with him than without him." Seth relaxed, hovering in the darkness near the shadows of his friends. If Grandpa was tricking him, he supposed he could always devise a fresh strategy for running away. Grandpa returned dressed for travel. He instructed Dale to wait with Grandma and to flee Fablehaven if they failed to return or returned as shadows. Seth glided over to where Hugo stood ready to pull the wooden cart like a giant rickshaw. Tanu and Coulter climbed up into the wagon, as did Grandpa and Mendigo. Seth floated alongside, waiting to transform. At last, the tedious wait ended in a fizzy rush, and Seth boosted himself up into the cart with the others. The shadow men sat up front. Grandpa and Seth hunkered down in the rear. "I do this against my better judgment," Grandpa said. "We need to take the risk," Seth maintained in his best grown-up voice. "I'm not going to abandon Tanu and Coulter when I might be able to help them." "Let's go, Hugo," Grandpa commanded. The cart lurched forward, and Hugo bounded down the path, setting a brisk pace. The warm night air washed over Seth as the cart advanced through the darkness. When the trail forked, Tanu indicated which direction to take. Seth relayed the gesture, and Grandpa issued a directive to Hugo. With Hugo lolloping tirelessly in front of the cart, they traveled down the road toward where the forgotten chapel once stood, then took several other paths until they ended up on a rugged, overgrown track that Seth had never traveled. The cart bounced and jolted over the uneven lane until Tanu and Coulter waved them to a halt. Grandpa switched on his flashlight, revealing a gradual grassy slope that led to a steep hill with a cave in the side. "Tell me they aren't pointing at the cave," Grandpa said. "Yes," Seth replied. "They already jumped down from the cart." "We may as well turn around now," Grandpa said. "That is the lair of Growlus, one of the major demons of Fablehaven. To enter his lair would place us in his power. It would be suicide." And that's where I'm going to stop for today, guys. All right. I hope you have a wonderful day. And, oh, my sticky note's not sticking. Yeah. Hope you have a wonderful day, guys. I miss you. And I hope you're enjoying the read alouds still. And I hope you're doing good and reading some fun books and playing some fun games and spending time with your families and having a good time. But I do miss you. And yeah, that's it until next time. So we'll see you later. Bye.